Hello everyone, so we are here again for another research lesson. Hello everyone, so we are here again for another research lesson. In this video, we will try to discuss to you the topic about research variables. Specifically, we will try to answer the following questions. Number 1, what is a research variable? Number 2, what are some examples of research variables? And number 3, how can a research beginner like you identify easily the dependent variable from independent variable for a given research situation? So, sit back and relax and try to learn something from this video. Okay, first, so we will answer the question number 1. What is a research variable? Are you familiar with the definition of a research variable? If not, then try to listen to this definition as I explain it to you. So a variable, by definition, refers to any characteristic of individuals, population, or subjects that vary or changes. So meaning to say, we can say that a certain variable is being discussed or noted in your research if it is a characteristic of a certain individual. I will give you later examples so that you will understand deeply what are research variables. Just take note that a variable is anything as long as it is a characteristic of that person, respondent, subject, or population that you are dealing with in your research. And remember that that characteristic of a person, individual, population, or subject varies or changes. So meaning to say it differs from one person to another person, from a group of people to another group of people. So we have here an example. Example number 1 is hair color. Hair color is considered as a variable because it is a characteristic of a person. And we have here the classifications or categories of your hair color. We have brown, black, and gray. So a certain person may have brown hair color, a black hair color, and a gray hair color. So it varies from one person to another person. So that means your hair color is considered to be a variable. So it was able to meet the first requirement that it should be a characteristic of an individual. Hair color is a characteristic of a person. And another one requirement for a variable, for a certain term to be considered as a variable, is that characteristic varies or changes. And we have in our example, hair color varies from person to person. It could either be brown, black, or gray. Example number 2. We have here body temperature. Body temperature is considered as a variable because it is a characteristic of a person. It is our characteristic. We have our body temperature if we are dealing here with humans. And it varies from person to person. For example, a person can have a body temperature of 36.5 degrees Celsius. Another person next to you can have 36.9 degrees Celsius as the body temperature. Or another person can have 37.1 degrees Celsius and another one is 35.8 degrees Celsius. So we have here body temperature as a research variable. that you can use in your research, because body temperature is a characteristic of a person or individual. At the same time, it has categories which varies from person to person, or from one person to another person. We have here another example. Height. The height, we can have here a height of a person, a height of a plant, or a height of an animal. It depends on how you specify that in your research. So height here is a research variable because it is a characteristic of a person, a plant, or an animal, as long as it is indicated in your research. And it varies from one individual to another one. Just like, for example, we have here categories of height. We have 162 centimeters, 169 centimeters, 170 centimeters, 189 centimeters, and 159 centimeters. So height here is a research variable because number one, it is a characteristic of a person, and it varies from a person to another person. And one tip, you can say that the term you are dealing with in your research is a variable if it has categories. Okay? And your height can also be expressed in this way. We have 5 feet and 4 inches, 5 feet and 6 inches, 5 feet and 2 inches, and 5 feet and 7 inches. Okay, so it depends on what unit of measurement are you going to use when you deal with height as your research variable. So hopefully you learned about research variable provided with the provided examples given. Okay, so we go next to the next concept about variables. Okay, in research, it is a variable if it can be measured. It can be measured, it can be manipulated, or it can be controlled. So we have your example, amount of water. The amount of water is considered here as a variable because it can be measured. You can measure that using a beaker, a graduated cylinder, or other measuring tools. And it can be manipulated, meaning to say you can change its amount. It could either be 50 ml, 100 ml, 70 ml, etc. And it can be controlled. So meaning to say, you can control your amount of water. You can only limit its amount to 50 ml all over your research activity. So 50 lang. So here, amount of water is considered as a research variable because it can be measured, manipulated, or controlled. Okay, another thing that you need to know about variables is that a research variable can have 2 or more values or categories. Okay? Again, variables can have 2 or more values or categories. So this one, I emphasized this earlier. So you can easily identify that it is a variable because it has categories or values. However, those values should be 2 or more. Okay? Because if it has only one value all throughout the population, that's not considered as a variable because it is the same. It does not vary from one person to another. Remember that clearly the definition of research variable, it should be any characteristic of a person as long as it varies or changes. So I'll give you examples here of research variables, okay, which have 2 or more variables. So we have here age. So age is a variable with the following values. It could either be 12 years old, 15 years old, 18 years old, or 20 years old. So the variable age here has 4 categories or 4 values. So these are examples only, and these values can vary depending on your sample that you will use or select in your research. Another variable provided here is soil type. Okay, categories can have loam, clay, or sandy. So we have here 3 categories or values for soil type, and so it meets the requirement of the term variable because it has 2 or more values or categories. Another one here is home location. So home location is a variable that has the following categories. So it depends on how or what will you use in your research. Example, home location, the categories can be rural or urban, or it could either be lowland or upland. So if there are still other categories that are related to it, so it can be used. So it depends on you as the researcher also. So that's it. And always remember that in choosing your variables, you have to make sure that it should be relevant to your research topic or your research title. For example, if your topic is about work immersion and your research samples, there will be grade 12 students, and so the variables that you will use there will be about the characteristics of the grade 12 students, such as their age, their home location, their grade, their height, if it is related to your research. But you cannot use their example soil type, amount of water, because these are not characteristics of grade 12 students. Okay, so we answered already question number 1, and so we will proceed to question number 2. What are some examples of research variables? Okay, actually there are many types of research variables, but in this video I will discuss only 2 variables that are commonly being dealt with by researchers, especially beginners in research. So we have here the independent and then the dependent variables. Okay, so this will be the emphasis of our video lesson. So we have here independent variable is considered to be the cost variable. So I have highlighted there the term cost. So cost, so meaning it is the root cause of something, while the dependent variable is the effect variable or the outcome variable that is affected by the independent variable. Okay, take note, the independent variable is the cause while the dependent variable is the effect. So usually this concept is being used in experimental research, but this I think will be very helpful to you, so that later when you deal with research like experimental in nature, so you can use these things. Okay, so we have here example. The tomato plant that receives a greater amount of organic fertilizer has the most number of fruits. So we have here the independent variable or the cost will be the amount of fertilizer, and this amount of fertilizer can vary. Okay, it could either be 50 ml, 100 ml, or it depends on how are you going to set up your research. So that's our independent, the cost. While the effect, which pertains to the dependent variable, will be the number of tomato fruits. It could either be 10, 15, or 20. So in that research, the number of fruits will have to depend on the amount of fertilizer. That is why we can say that the amount of fertilizer there is the cost, and automatically it will be the independent variable, and the number of tomato fruits will be the dependent variable. Okay, and we have here independent variable. It is named independent variable because you have there the word independent, because it is independent of other causes or factors. So meaning it can stand alone. So for example, the amount of fertilizer. So that is considered as independent variable because um, does not depend on anything. Okay? It can stand on its own. And on the other hand, it is termed dependent variable because of the term dependent, which is dependent on something. And that something is the cause. And that cause is your independent variable. So meaning to say, your dependent variable is dependent upon your independent variable, which is the cause. The cause is the independent variable and the effect is your dependent variable. So always take note of that. And this concept of dependent and dependent variable is always used in experimental research. And I think that's the basic thing that you need to consider. But later, I will provide also an example on how to come up or to find out the or determine the independent variable from dependent variable in a non-experimental research. Okay, so we have here example number 2. The lighter the person, the faster its running time to complete a one-time running event. So maybe this is now the conclusion of a certain research undertaking. So we have here our independent variable, which is the cause, will be your weight. Okay, because it was mentioned in the example that the lighter the person, so lighter meaning magaan, so it has to something to be related with weight. So weight here is our independent variable. It could be 45 kilograms, 47 kilograms, 50 kilograms. While the effect, the dependent variable, is the running time. Okay, running time, which could be 10 minutes, 23.5 minutes, or 15.4 minutes. So meaning to say, in this research, if you have a lower weight, you can have that faster running time. Just remember that when you identify the independent and the dependent variable in an experimental research, always remember that the independent variable is the cause variable and the dependent variable is the effect or outcome variable. By following such thing or by noting such concept, you will not be misguided. Instead, you will be able to easily understand or identify which one is the dependent and which one is the independent variable. Okay? So this time, we will try to deal with non-experimental research. How are we going to identify which one is the independent and which is the dependent variable? So we have here the definition of an independent variable. So the independent variable is fixed. It is a fixed variable, and it is not usually a subject for investigation, but still it is a characteristic of the target sample. While the dependent variable is the one that is being investigated or measured. So we have here an example for you to understand, for you to analyze, and to identify which one is the independent and which one is the dependent variable. So we have here example: readiness of grade 12 students on home-based work immersion. That is your title. So the thing that we want to investigate in that research is the readiness, okay, the level of readiness of grade 12 students for home-based work immersion. Since that is the thing or the one that we want to investigate in our research, therefore that becomes our dependent variable. And remember that variables must be categorized or has values. So in our case, so we have here an example of categories for the readiness, the level of readiness. It could be very ready, ready, somewhat ready, or not ready. On the other hand, the independent variables that we will have here will be the following. Since our research samples are the grade 12 students, so the probable independent variables related to them will be one, the number of family members where the grade 12 students belong. So example, they have 5, 7, 3, or 2 members in the family. And another one is monthly family income of their family. So categories could be 10,000 pesos, 5,000 pesos, or 8,432 pesos. So you can have still different values because it depends on your research and how are you going to do that in your research. But you need to remember that a variable needs to be categorized in that has 2 or more values as mentioned earlier. Okay, so that's it. That's how are you going to identify the dependent and the independent variables in your non-experimental research. And more of that will be tackled as we answer question number 3. So we have here, how can a research beginner like you identify easily the dependent variable from independent variable for a given research situation? Okay, so for experimental research, I have given you already examples earlier, and it is really easy to identify. Although you need to analyze better the research situation because the independent variable should be the cause and the dependent variable should be the effect. While in the case of a non-experimental research, we have here some tips that I can give you. So for you to identify easily the dependent variable, so we have here the research title, Readiness of Grade 12 Students on Home-Based Work Immersion. So remember that our formula in developing the research title is first is the dependent variable plus the respondents plus the location. Okay, so meaning to say the first term in your research title will be your dependent variable, and apart from that, in this research, so they are trying to investigate the level of readiness of grade 12 students. So readiness here will be your dependent variable. And another one of identifying the dependent variable and the independent variable easily will be on your specific question. Try to look at one descriptive question. Okay, example. What is the level of readiness of grade 12 students on home-based work immersion when they will be grouped as a whole and when they will be grouped according to number of family members and location? So in this specific question, it is asking the level of readiness. So meaning it is the thing that will be measured or investigated by the researchers, and so automatically that becomes your dependent variable, while your independent variables will be number of family members and location. Okay, so why number of family members and location? Because these are characteristics of grade 12 students. Okay, and it can be categorized. Okay, and it is fixed. Okay, so we have here another exercise, a research situation. A researcher would like to study the entrepreneurial skills of grade 12 cookery students and the researcher wanted to know further if their skills vary in terms of their average grade in entrepreneurship and availability of family business. So we have here, so in this research situation, the researcher is trying to investigate the entrepreneurial skills of the students. And in that case, that will be our dependent variable. And what about our independent variables? So it will be the average grade in the entrepreneurship of the grade 12 students and the availability of family business, So for our average grade in entrepreneurship, their categories probably can be, or values can be 95, 87, 86, or so on and so forth. Or for availability of family business, you can have two here. Could be available or not available. And for the entrepreneurial skills, it could either be very skillful, somewhat skillful, or not skillful. So if you noticed, categories are provided for the variables because these are the characteristics of or features of research variables. Okay, so there are still a lot of research variables, and I will try to make a new video about that before we will come up, or before we will write your conceptual framework. So I hope you learned something from this video, and see you again for the next episode of our research lessons.